Welcome to the CyberSecure Podcast. I'm Tom Carpenter, and today we're going to be talking about the CyberSecure certification, providing an overview of what it covers and why it's important to you. And in our Focus on Research section, we're going to talk about situational leadership and its relevance to cybersecurity. So let's begin by talking about this question: what is CyberSecure? CyberSecure, of course, is provided by the American Academy of Cybersecurity Professionals, or AACSP, and it is, first of all, a certification. Now, what does it mean to be a certification? Well, the difference between a training program and a certification is that a certification validates your knowledge and learning. There, in other words, is an exam. You could attend a class and receive a certificate of attendance or a certificate of completion, but there has been no proof that you actually retained any of the information that you learned in the class. A certification goes a step further. It says, yes, you need to know certain things, but you also need to prove it. And that's what CyberSecure does. It allows you to not only gain research-based knowledge on what is important for cybersecurity and awareness in the realm of cybersecurity, but it also validates that you have properly acquired that knowledge. So it is a certification. It's also an initial learning process. That is to say that there's e-learning and practice exams that you can go through in order to learn what you need to know to pass the actual certification exam. This e-learning is research-based, and what that means is our organization has reviewed well over 100 research papers and projects in the area of cybersecurity, what matters in cybersecurity, and specifically cybersecurity awareness. How do we develop the appropriate awareness related to cybersecurity? And then from that research, we formulated 3 different areas of knowledge that you need to master. First of all, we have security concepts, then we have secure solutions, and finally, secure actions. The security concepts provides the foundation on which you can build an understanding of security solutions and actions. All throughout the process, we're building awareness so that we have the proper motivation to take those actions. So this is a very important concept to begin with, an initial learning process. However, CyberSecure is more than that. In order to maintain the CyberSecure certification status, you'll need to earn continuing education credits. And we provide webinars and annual learning updates to help you accomplish continuing education, and therefore the maintenance and renewal of your certification. So it's also an ongoing learning process, which is wildly important in an area like cybersecurity. There's a membership that's going to include webinars, one-page sheets that cover various different security topics, giving you an overview and a reminder of what needs to be known about it, and also that can be used as handouts in your organization to build security awareness, and various papers that we publish throughout the year to give you the most up-to-date information on research related to cybersecurity and security awareness for the level of knowledge people need for cybersecure. Now, the second question that we need to answer is, why join AACSP and participate in the CyberSecure program? So what's the difference between us and everybody else that might offer some kind of security awareness training? The big difference is that, first of all, we're research-based. So we do not generate information simply based on the opinions of one individual. I, for example, have worked in the information technology arena since the early 1990s, and I've worked with cybersecurity before it was called cybersecurity throughout all of that time period, ranging from desktop security to network security to application security and software development security and network security. And yet, the reality is, I would not have perfect knowledge of all areas of security. So by digging into the research to find out what it says, we ensure that we're providing the knowledge you need to truly understand cybersecurity and maintain security awareness. By joining AACSP and becoming a member and beginning the CyberSecure journey, you're going to improve your cybersecurity posture as an individual, but also as an organization. So as an individual, it's going to reduce the likelihood of personal attacks. In your individual personal life, you're going to be better protected against phishing attacks, malware attacks, and other types of cybersecurity attacks that might be launched against you. You're also going to reduce the likelihood of personal work-related attack. In other words, you being that individual, sadly, that is the one that caused a door to be opened so that someone could attack the organization's network or steal the organization's data. So by developing cybersecurity awareness, you reduce the likelihood you'll be that individual. It also improves your employability. Now, employability goes well beyond just the human resources department is looking for a particular certification or college degree. But rather, it's about when you go into that interview process, what is the expressed knowledge that you present to that interviewer? CyberSecure gives you the knowledge of cybersecurity that you need, whether you are an accountant, a marketing professional, an engineer, an IT professional, whatever role you play, you're going to present yourself as someone who has a knowledge of security and therefore securely and properly will use that organization's data, increasing your employability. It also improves your intellectual capital. One of the key factors in getting ahead in organizations is the intellectual capital that you provide to that organization. In other words, what is the knowledge that is within you and uniquely in you? And this is part of that knowledge set that you need to develop. And as I said, it also improves the cybersecurity posture of your team and organization. It's very interesting to note the informal learning that takes place within organizations. It is quite common for people to go to training and so forth, and then go back and, without even meaning to, teach what they've learned to other people. Imagine your whole team has gone through CyberSecure. And then as you talk about security over the ensuing days or weeks, there is an increased awareness among the whole team and increased knowledge retention among the whole team. It's interesting because I was with a group of people who had gone through the CyberSecure certification training and process. And as we sat in a meeting, without any prompting from me whatsoever, they were mentioning, hey, someone did this recently. And I realized that not only was that an attempt to attack me, steal my information through phishing or something like that, but it brought to mind several other attempts that had happened in the preceding months. In other words, their awareness was now heightened, both currently and reciprocally into their history. So they understood what was going on in the past. And finally, you'll understand cybersecurity concepts and solutions so that you have the proper motivation. You see, motivation is absolutely key to cybersecurity awareness and secure actions in any environment. Now, the final question about CyberSecure is, where can I learn more? And this one's easy. Just visit aacsp.com. That's the website of the American Academy of Cybersecurity Professionals, aacsp.com. Now, this final point from the opening section discussing what is cybersecure leads us right into our focus on research for this podcast. And our focus on research is all about this thing called motivation. How do we have motivation to actually accomplish cybersecurity, to build cybersecurity? And so what we're going to talk about today is the concept of situational leadership. Situational leadership was and is a leadership model developed by Paul Hersey and Kenneth Blanchard all the way back in 1969. Now, the book that they originally published this model in has been updated 4 or 5 times and has evolved a bit over time. But the basic concept of situational leadership says that in order to be an effective leader, you need to understand the context in which the follower is operating. In other words, to lead someone effectively, I need to know the context that they're in, and that context includes their ability and their willingness to perform the task that needs to be done. So if they're lacking in ability and or lacking in willingness, we treat them one way. If they're lacking in ability but have the willingness, we treat them another way. If they have the ability but lack the willingness, we treat them another way. And if they have both the ability and the willingness, we treat them another way. In other words, our interactions with them, the treatment of them, is going to differ depending on the context of the individual that's doing the work. So let's take a look at the research. Here we have a paper published in Leader to Leader in 2018 titled Situational Leadership and Cybersecurity. And situational leadership is itself a registered trademark. The authors of this article simply focus on the reality of security, pointing out some interesting things. In 2017, for example, Ponemon Research Institute said that nation states, criminals, and malicious insiders have driven the average cost of a cybersecurity breach to nearly $4 million. The average cost to recover from a breach for a small or mid-sized business is $690,000, according to the same institute. And according to Inc. Online, May of 2017, 60% of small businesses are out of business within 6 months of a breach. That is a significant statistic. Now, realize it may be plus or minus some percentage points based on the group that they polled in the survey. But even if we lower that to 20%, it would still be very significant, wouldn't it? 20% of consumers will stop doing business with a retailer following a breach, according to one study. Yahoo was fined $35 million by the SEC for failing to properly disclose their 2014 data breach, and Verizon reduced its purchase price of Yahoo by $350 million following the disclosure. Losses due to business email compromise, which we cover in detail in the CyberSecure course, are expected to exceed $9 billion in 2018. And believe me, it hasn't gotten any better. And they give more statistics as well. The point is, if you begin to look at the statistics of how many data breaches there are, how many security incidents there are, and what the cost is, it is significant. And so we have to understand that it's important to address this. Now, they go on to state a very important thing. These facts indicate that businesses today face increasingly sophisticated threats that demand thoughtful and inclusive responses. Simply stated, cybersecurity is not a compartmentalized problem that a chief executive officer or CEO and his or her leadership team pitch to the IT department and then support from a distance. First, the technology constantly changes, and no single technical solution is a panacea. Second, in the vast majority of cases, human error or negligence sets the stage for the breach. These two factors make managing cybersecurity first and foremost a leadership issue. Specifically, they say these two factors make managing cyber risk a first and foremost leadership issue. Now, what is this telling us? Leadership. Remember, leaders have followers, and so leadership is influencing followers. Now, I'm going to address this concept from two perspectives. One perspective is going to be the leader of a team or of an entire organization, and the other is going to be self-leadership. In fact, one of the original creators of situational leadership as a leadership model, Ken Blanchard, went on to actually write about self-leadership in relation to the situational leadership model, because he realized that this same model that we would use to lead others can also be used to lead ourselves. And this is a very important concept. I'll get into that in a moment. Situational leadership is broken into three basic questions. What is the task? What is the assessment? And what is the approach? So what is the task says, what am I trying to do? Well, I want to build security awareness. I want to make sure my employees are acting in a secure manner, right? So this is the task before me. Now, the next step then is what is the assessment? And the assessment says, what is the ability of my team members and what is the willingness of my team members? Now, remember, willingness can be about motivation, but it can also be about a lack of confidence. In other words, it might not be so much that they don't want to, but they don't believe they can. So they're lacking in the confidence that they need to actually do the task, which still falls into that willingness factor. So it's both about motivation, also about confidence. The first part, ability. Do they have the ability? Well, the ability to be aware of security comes down to understanding the security issue. The ability to act in a secure manner comes down to understanding how to use security solutions. And that's why we cover all of that in CyberSecure. The motivation comes from fear. It also comes from gain. In other words, motivation comes from fear of a security incident, understanding the threat and understanding the implications of an incident occurring. For example, what we saw small businesses, many of them closing within 6 months of a security incident. Well, I certainly don't want the small business I work for to close, so I want to make sure I'm behaving in a secure manner to help prevent such an incident from occurring, right? So that would be a motivation by fear. A motivation by gain is to say, what do I gain? What do I benefit from this? Well, remember, we talked about some of those things like intellectual capital. I improve my intellectual capital, which improves my employability. In other words, an organization is more likely to want to hire me, to employ me, to use me for a particular project, to promote me, because I have this security mindset. I understand the basic fundamentals of cybersecurity, and I am aware of security issues. So that would be ability plus motivation. So assessing that is the second step. Then the third step is, how do I approach leading the people based on my understanding of the task I want to accomplish and their ability and willingness to complete that task? To help us understand this, they present an image that is the standard image coming from the Leadership Studies Incorporated organization, and it comes from Ken Blanchard's materials, as well as Peter Hersey's materials. So both of them over the years have published different materials that include this information. So it's spread around in a lot of places. But the basic concept is you have 4 defined situations, and then we have our performance readiness measurement. Performance readiness is a measurement of their ability and willingness. Okay, so when I'm answering that second question, trying to understand what is the assessment, I'm evaluating performance readiness. And performance readiness is a combination of ability and willingness. So I have, first of all, situation 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I have the readiness 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I would look at the assessment of the situation and say, if it's readiness level 1, I want to respond with situation number 1. If it's readiness 2, S2, readiness 3, S3, readiness 4, S4, and so forth. Now, the difference between these 4 is the spectrum of supportive behavior and directive behavior. So supportive behavior can be low or high. This is also called relationship behavior. How am I going to interact with the individual? And then task behavior or directive behavior can be low or high. So when directive behavior is high and supportive behavior is low, I'm over there in S1. That matches up with R1, where the individual lacks abilities. Maybe they have some, but they're low in abilities, and they're either insecure, they lack confidence, or they're unmotivated or unwilling, right? So they don't really want to do it, and they don't know how to do it. So in that case, I have to put a heavy emphasis on telling or directing or guiding. I have to make sure that I'm giving detailed instructions about how to perform the task, because the most important thing in any organization is getting the task done, right? So I need to make sure I'm giving detailed instructions that they can follow to get the task done. The goal is that hopefully as they gain in abilities, they move up to R2 or R3 or R4 over time, but also as they're gaining in abilities, they'll begin to build more confidence, right? And as they build more confidence, they go from R1 to R2. In an R2 situation where they still are low in abilities, but they're high in willingness because their abilities are beginning to improve. Now I'm in the selling S2 situation, persuading and explaining. So I have high task and high relationship. I'm still fairly heavily involved in giving direction, but I'm leaning toward energizing and motivating them more, trying to move them continually forward in the process. Then eventually the goal is that they move to S3, which is the response to R3 as to their performance readiness. Now they're able, but maybe for some reason unwilling. This often happens. We go through ebbs and flows. We build energy for it as we're building our abilities. We're getting better at it, so we get more energy. But then it can either become monotonous or we reach a plateau, our abilities are not improving, and our motivation tends to wane. So in those kind of situations, we go to high relationship and low task. I'm still going to give them more direction, help them to continue to improve their abilities, but I'm really focusing on that motivation and energy because my ultimate goal is to get them to a performance readiness state of R4, where they're both highly able and highly confident and willing. This is an individual that I can delegate to. I can simply say, hey, I need task A done, and I know they're going to do it, and I know they're going to do it well. Right? So that's this concept of situational leadership. Now, as we've talked through it, we've kind of talked about what do we do with a team that we're leading, but now let's talk about self-leadership. See, self-leadership would be where I have to, first of all, ask, what's the task I want to accomplish? And then I have to say, all right, what's the assessment of my performance readiness? Am I in R1, R2, R3, or R4? That is to say, I have the ability to identify that a task needs to be accomplished, even if I don't really want to do that task, right? So I might assess my readiness and say, I don't really have a lot of motivation for it. But what's the first step then? The first step is to get the details of how to do it. Learn more about how to do it. Maybe I watch a YouTube video. Maybe I read a book. Maybe I read a magazine article. Maybe I talk to a friend or a mentor that knows how to do it already. The point is, I'm looking for ability. My primary focus right now is ability. As I begin to develop ability, then I'm going to move on to understanding how to be more motivated for that task, focusing on the outcomes, focusing on what I can accomplish because I learned how to do that task and so forth. And then I'm going to eventually be focusing more on the motivation and a little less on an improving ability. And then finally, I get to the stage where I'm just on autopilot with it. I'm very good at it. And therefore, it doesn't require as much energy to do it. And motivation is always acceptable and fine to get the job done. Because I'm very good at it, the energy is there. Now, this is a way to think about these concepts. I would encourage you to consider looking at some of Ken Blanchard books. Ken Blanchard and Peter Hersey have together developed a book on organizational motivation and leadership, where they talk about situational leadership. So if you look for books that they authored together, they're there. And then Ken Blanchard has also brought this concept up in several of his books over the years. And by the way, if you're not familiar with Ken Blanchard directly, you might have heard of Who Moved My Cheese or The 1 Minute Manager from all the way back in the 1980s that has sold millions of copies. He is the author, or at least co-author, of those books and many, many others. I think there are probably 35, 40 different books that have Ken Blanchard's name on them. Fewer books with Peter Hersey, but the book that Peter Hersey and Ken Blanchard wrote together that's gone through 4 or 5 editions is a phenomenal book on leadership, and I highly recommend it. So we have talked in this podcast about CyberSecure, what it is, and situational leadership, what that is, and how it can apply to security awareness, both leading our team and leading ourselves.